Hi, everyone. It's Anna J. Wellner with the Author Library in cooperation with Creative Edge Publicity. Today, I have a fantastic panel of wonderful women. Phillippi Ryan, who is a USA Today bestselling author, award-winning author of 13 thrillers, winning 5 Agatha Awards, 4 Anthonys, including Best Novel of the Year, and the coveted Mary Higgins Clark Award. She's also won 37 Emmys for her investigative television reporting, and she is still on air in Boston. Her newest standalone novel of suspense, Her Perfect Life, received starred reviews from Kirkus and Publishers Weekly, and Mystery Scene magazine calls it a powerhouse of a novel. Tosca is the New York Times bestseller of multiple books, including The Line Between and A Single Sight. KJ Howe is the international bestselling author of The Freedom Broker and Skyjet. She is also the executive director of the International Thrillers Writers Association. Welcome to the show, ladies. It's a pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you. It's so nice to see you all. We haven't seen each other in person for so long, so this is such a treat.
Yes, it's been a long time. It seems like it's been forever.
Well, thank you so much for gracing me with your presence. I know it's and I love every single one of you guys. It's an amazing moment for me to have you all on the show, and I wanted to ask. I know it's different for each one of you, but how long have you been actively publishing and releasing books? And do you have any advice for other authors out there?
That's so funny. Who's been writing the longest among us? Do we know?
I wrote my first novel in 1989.
You win. Okay, go ahead. Tell them.
But it took me until 2006 to sell it. So, and I didn't sell that one. I sold a different one. The first one is still in a box. So it's been a few years that I've been at it.
Well, let me ask you, what was the first one that sold, though? What was, so you said
the first one I finally sold was called Demon a Memoir, and that became my very first novel. But I wrote that one in 1998, and it took me 6 weeks to write it. And then I thought, this is, the angels sang. I thought this is, meant to be. No, and so I thought this is going to sell right away. And, took 6-7 years, and then of course a year to get published and all that. So it's been a long road for me. I have bags under my eyes.
It's a long road for everybody. Kim, go ahead.
So yeah, I'm more relatively new to the genre. I was a medical writer before, so I did a lot of patient education pieces. If you want to know about diabetes or high blood pressure, I'm your girl. And so I decided, I have a lifelong passion for thrillers. So I decided to go back and do my master's in creative writing and really study the craft. I took a ton of courses at my local university. And once again, just like Tosca said, it takes time. I wrote, a romantic suspense novel, but sadly there were a lot of dead bodies in that. So romance didn't seem to be my calling. And then I went, to kind of, more thriller, and I felt like very much at home there. And I just decided I wanted to write a strong female protagonist. That's something that was a little bit different. And we need some more strong female role models, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
How about you?
Well, it's interesting because I didn't start writing until 15 years ago, whenever that was, 15 years ago. I was 55 at that time, and I had been working as a reporter in television for those many years. I guess it was 30 some years at the time when I started writing fiction. And I always kind of thought about writing fiction. I'd never written anything. I'd never tried anything. There are no novels in drawers, things like that. But one day at Channel 7, I just got a really good idea for a novel. And we all know that moment of thinking, oh, good idea. And you can't get rid of that. And I knew it was a good idea for a novel. It was Secret Messages in Computer Spam. I had gotten, really quickly, I'll tell you the story, that I had gotten a spam email that I had opened by mistake. And in the subject line of the email, it said, a new refinancing deal for you. but in the body of the email, it was what looked like lines from a Shakespearean play. And I thought, why would somebody send a spam that goes to millions of people that anybody could open with a refinancing deal for you in the headline, and then dialogue in the message? And my brain said to me, and I know you as writers will understand this, my brain said to me, maybe it's a secret message. And I thought, secret messages in computer spam, what a great idea. Who would do that? And how could you do that? And what would be the point of it? And who would get killed? Because of course it would be a murder mystery. And who would be the intrepid reporter who would solve this crime? Because I didn't even have another thought that it would be anything but a reporter. And I went home and I said to my husband, I've got a great idea for a novel. I'm going to write a mystery. And my husband says, great, honey. He says, do you know how to write a novel? And I'm like, how hard can that be? You know, I've read a million of them. And of course, I say that to you all because that's ridiculous, because we know how hard it can be. But I was obsessed and I was compelled. And I wrote this novel, and we can talk more about the strong woman element of it later. I wrote this novel, and it was 723 pages long. So I had to, because I was just, so good. I'm typing. And I had to cut 400 pages, and that was a wonderful experience. And that novel sold, and that became Primetime, which won the Agatha for Best First Novel. And that was the beginning of my career. So just chance.
You were hooked then.
I was hooked. Well, I loved it. You know, I wonder about all of you, because as a reporter, and we can talk more about this later as well, I never made anything up. I've never made anything up. I've told stories, but the idea that I could use my imagination to come up with a new world. I mean, Tosca, your new worlds are incredible. Where does that even come from?
You know, I grew up reading fantasy. And I grew up wanting to be a ballerina, actually. And so I was pursuing becoming a professional ballet dancer when I was a teenager. And so I never in a million years thought about becoming a novelist at all, because I loved the discipline of it. And I loved the hard work of it. I loved the storytelling. And so, you know, I loved the stories, and I lived in that. And my favorite TV shows growing up that my parents didn't always let me watch were like Love Boat and Fantasy Island, especially Fantasy Island. So I just grew up in that, loving that world. I look at my kids today, and they've got video games and all this stuff, you know, movies on demand. But, you know, what I had was books. And so that was my, you know, escape from reality. And so I always wanted to tell stories in some form or another. And it wasn't until I became injured as a teen and realized that I probably wasn't going to make it in the ballet world that I went off to college to become, actually somebody told me, maybe you should become like a news anchor or something. And I was like, well, I'll try to do that. And, but I came home. What happened is I came home my freshman year for spring break to Nebraska. I'm the only person I know who goes to Nebraska for spring break. And I was talking with my dad about one of my favorite novels, and about how a great novel is like a roller coaster with twists and turns, and sometimes you're disoriented, and you know, you're on the edge of your seat. And I just blurted out that day and said, I think I'd like to try to write a book. And the idea was I wanted to provide that fantasy world and that roller coaster ride for somebody else. And so that's actually how I got into writing. It was 1988. And my dad said, well, when you come home for the summer, 1989, when you come home for the summer, I will pay you what you would have made working at the bank if you take the summer, write your first novel, do it full time, and treat it like a job. And I didn't know that one summer was not enough time to write an epic historical novel about the Neolithic people of Stonehenge. So I did it. So I've always loved the world building. I've always lived more there, I think, than here.
Yeah. And
KJ, how about you? Yeah.
Well, what Tosca's story actually touches my heart as well, because, you know, it's sort of, I think when we read, we're so involved in another world, and it's such an opportunity for escapism. And that is such a pleasurable experience that when I read David Morrell's The Brotherhood of the Rose,
Mm.
For me, that was exactly the moment where I said to myself, you know what? If I could ever provide that level of excitement and escapism for anyone else, it would be a dream come true. And for me, my father worked in telecommunications. So I lived abroad most of my life in Africa and Puerto Rico and Saudi Arabia and Europe. And it was really hard because I was constantly changing schools and I was always the new kid. So books really became something that I relied on. And I feel like, in a sense, they were my friends that I could transport from place to place. And the characters, I guess, felt pretty real. And that's why I really wanted to pursue it, that it was just something that really touched my heart.
I think that's very true of a lot of authors that I talk with, is that they've grown up reading and escaping into these wonderful worlds. And then over time, they felt the need to create that kind of escapism for their readers. And that's such a joy to be able to do, to give people a place to escape for a few hours out of the day, if they're lucky to have a few hours of reading time, or just an hour, or just 30 minutes over their lunch break even.
I grew up in really rural Indiana. Speaking of our young reading experiences, I grew up in really rural Indiana, so rural that you couldn't see another house from our house. So talk about Nebraska, Tosca. I was in Indiana, and my sister and I used to ride our ponies to the library to get books, and
I love it.
we used to read up in the hayloft of the barn behind our house. And I did read Nancy Drew, but I fell in love with Sherlock Holmes. And then I remember, we're talking about the pivotal books, I remember reading Murder on the Orient Express. And I remember the ending of that. And I thought, how did Agatha Christie do that? How did she fool me like that? And I thought, I wonder what it would be like to be able to write that kind of a gorgeous story that would draw you in and lure you with the storytelling and make you connect with the characters and think you knew what must have happened, and then in the end just pull the rug out from under you, and you would say, oh my golly, how did that happen? And that was my love of storytelling. Well, you began with David Morrell, our idol, and I began with Agatha Christie, another idol, and it was the story. I mean, it's especially in the pandemic, I think that it's always safe inside a book. It's always safe inside a book. You're solving someone else's problems. You're dealing with someone else's dilemma. You're handling someone else's world. And that's why we do this. We want you to say, oh, what a good book this is at the end. That's what we're all striving for.
Well, that's a great segue to my next question. What has been the best part of your journey, each and every one of you? I mean, is it connecting with fans and hearing how they love your work? Was it becoming a bestseller? I mean, why do you wake up and say, I made the right choice to follow this passion? And what is it for each of you?
I think for me, a big part of it is connecting with fans. That's, because you've put all this work in, you've been writing and kind of speaking to the void almost. And so when you get out in front of people, I mean, I am an introvert, but to get out in front of fans and to hear their stories, because they will tell you their stories, and to be able to hear their stories and to hear what they love about reading and to hear why this particular book was significant to them. And sometimes, they tell me, I read this book when I was going through a tough time. I was taking care of elderly parents. I was going through a divorce. I was sick in the hospital, whatever it was. And so to know that you've become a part of someone else's life and that you have been there for them during a trying time, or even a great time when they're on vacation and they're escaping while they're escaping, is such a privilege. And it's such an honor to be able to be a part of somebody else's life in that way.
And Tosca, you have legions of fans who really rely on you for your books are inspirational and imaginative and take people to other places. And I've seen how your fans love you so much for that.
They are the kindest, nicest people. So I feel very lucky. Thank you, Hank, for saying that. Yeah.
Well, that's a lot of hard work. And Kimberly, too, you have this exciting, amazing story that you tell about your strong women. And I bet your fans connect with that as well.
Well, yes, I mean, I would echo everything Tosca said about, connecting with readers, but to go even, in a different direction, for me, I've spent the last 6 or 7 years involved in the research of kidnap and ransom. And kidnapping has become an exponentially growing problem across the globe. So for me, an added kind of feel is to be able to tell people what it's like to experience a kidnapping, who these heroes are, like Thea Paris, my character, that are kind of elite kidnap negotiators, and they basically have a go bag ready at all times, and then they take off to these dangerous destinations. And many of them are soccer moms and dads at home and live a very natural, normal life until, of course, they go on the job. And here they are negotiating. And this is no ordinary negotiation. This is life or death. And for me, I hope that I represent these, kind of heroes that are very unknown, because not a lot of people know about this job at all. And I hope that putting a spotlight on that and their heroism will, benefit, them, and also help other people travel safely, because I do a lot of talks on travel safety, and that means a lot to me as well. And how about you, Hank?
Oh gosh, it's interesting to hear. Anna was asking about what is it that makes us get up every morning and want to do what we do. I've been a television reporter for 43 years. I've wired myself with hidden cameras and confronted corrupt politicians and gone undercover and in disguise and chased down criminals. And all of that translates into making my books be very authentic and genuine, and they're engaging because I'm telling you the inside story of what it's like to be a reporter, just like you, Kim, and your hostage negotiating people. I mean, there is a side to that life that is unique and dangerous and stressful. I mean, your hostage negotiators, like a reporter, can never make a mistake. They can never say one wrong word. They can never be 1 minute late. Every single thing they do has to be perfect. And that's where her perfect life came from, is that striving for perfection. So what gets me to loving this every day is to be able to illustrate and put in the spotlight, as you said, Kim, what it's really like to be a reporter. And for a reporter, being in the spotlight is dangerous. It's downright dangerous. And this book came from, let me go back and I'll tell you that later, because what gets me to the computer every day is looking for the story. Just like as a reporter, I'm looking for my next good story. As a writer, I have an idea and I want to see what happens. And I can't wait to get to the computer every morning and see what happens, because I don't use an outline. So the only way I know what happens is to write the next sentence and the next paragraph and the next scene and see what unfolds. And that's very exciting for me. The idea of being able to create a story out of nothing but my own imagination is a real treasure.
It is. So would you consider yourself, all of you, this is a question for all of you, what would you consider yourself to be, a plotter or a pantser? As they say in the writing community, to plot everything out and have a very specific outline before going into the first draft of the novel, or just go for it?
I have to have an outline myself. And, when we teach at writing conferences and we get this question from people that, I always say for other writers and aspiring writers, the most important thing is to know yourself and to know how you work best and how you write best. And it took me a little bit of time to learn that I work best with an outline, at least a rough roadmap, so that I know. I leave a little room for mystery, because there's always something that happens in the process of writing that you couldn't have planned for, didn't see coming. And so there's always a little plot twist in there, even in the process. Now, having said that, when I wrote the line between, I thought to myself, I've done 10 of these. And so isn't this kind of inherent by now? And a good mutual friend of ours, Stephen James, is also a pantser. And so I thought maybe I'm Stephen James. And so I decided to write the book without an outline. And it was a disaster for me. And I ended up having to rewrite the book, and the pub date got pushed back because I had to pull all the wires out and put it back together. So the big lesson for me was I'm not Stephen James, and I'm also not Hank. I'm Tosca Lee, and so the way I have to write is with an outline. So I learned my lesson the hard way.
Well, whenever I'm asked plotter or pantser, I always answer pants on fire. And for me, I'm more like Hank. I just come up with an idea and a concept, and I just kind of feel my way through the characters and in the story. Now, I'm always thinking about the end game because I usually know where I want to go, but I feel very much like that it's the joy of writing a book is the exploration of the story and the characters. And I also think, look, if I'm surprised, hopefully the readers will be surprised. And it has worked well for me so far. I've been told, by many people to write outlines, and I've tried, but I just feel like I'm forcing something, and I just keep going back to going into the writing and telling the story. And I just feel it's revelatory and really enjoyable. And it sounds like, Hank, you have the same emotional experience doing that.
Well, it's interesting to hear you say that because revelatory is such a wonderful word to use. I had two quick stories, three. Really quick. One is I had an editor once say to me, "Can't you just send us an outline? Wouldn't that be easier?" And I said, "No, I can't send an outline because how do I know what happened until it happens? And it can't happen to me." And Tosca, I know you're just cringing, but it can't happen to me. It has to happen on the page as it happens, unfolding. And that's the only way I can do it. I did try the new book that I'm working on right now. Sort of a story came to me, and I thought, ooh, maybe I am Jeffrey Deaver. Maybe now I have turned into an outliner. Jeffrey Deaver outlines absolutely everything. So I thought, yes, I have this outline. I made this outline. And I was so proud of myself. I was dancing around. So then I tried to write this book, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's what comes next. Yep, that's what comes next. Yep. And it was terrible. It was terrible. It had no magic. It had no emotion. It had no inner thought. It had no any richness. It just was the story. I mean, I had figured out the story, and then I thought, okay, I'm going to tell this story, but I didn't know how to do it that way. Mm-hmm. And I honestly had to go back and open up every single page, open up the pages, and let the real story come out. And so far, so good on that. But that, so no, I'm not Jeffrey Deaver. As Tosca says, I'm Hank Phillippi Ryan, and I do it my way. So when people say to me, wow, the ending of Her Perfect Life, the twists in Her Perfect Life, you really surprised me. I say, yeah, wasn't that a surprise? I mean, talk about a surprise ending. I surprise myself. And if I can surprise myself, that is when I figured out the ending of Her Perfect Life. And it took a while because at some point in pantsing, you think, oh, I just set up this crime and now I have to solve it. And what if I can't? When I figured out the end of Her Perfect Life, I honestly stood up right here in this room. I stood up and applauded. I was so happy. I thought, I got this. So when people say, talk about a surprise ending, I surprise myself. That's the joy of it. But wow, don't you all think it's a tightrope? I mean, do you think every time you write a book, this is the time it isn't going to work?
Pretty much every time.
Always that self-doubt.
Every time I finish a book, I think it's a career-ending piece of crap every single time. And I have friends who are complete opposites, they finish it and they're like, this is the greatest thing I've ever written. I'm not that. Every time I'm like, I think I just bit the big one here.
So something that I have always found interesting was that we're drawn to a certain genre or subgenre. And I love the fact that we all write different types of books in the same kind of genre because of emotion. And because of emotion we're drawn towards. For example, a lot of people who write with romantic elements are drawn to the hope, and it's so that they're attached to that. A lot of people who write mysteries are really good logical puzzle solvers. And people who write fantasy or love to read fantasy and science fiction tend to be attached to wonder. And myself, I can say that, you know, as a thriller fan, an action thriller, I think my emotion for that is excitement or adrenaline. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a thought and love to hear what you guys think of that connection to the subgenres, even within a genre.
That is so brilliant. That is the most thought-provoking thing I've ever heard. I've never had that way of heard that way of thinking about it, or even had that way of thinking about it, Kim. And I really love that. And when I think about why I write the books I write, what blossoms in my head is justice. You know, I've been an investigative reporter for all these years. I've covered many, many a trial. And I think about justice and what that means and how we get there and what is truth and what is the combination of truth and justice. And is there a different kind of justice in every kind of situation, not just legal justice, but emotional justice and personal justice and karmic justice, all those kinds of things. And I think that thread goes through every one of my books. It's the puzzle plus justice for me. And I think that every reader and writer who listens to this show would be well versed to take what you say to heart, Kim, because that essence, thinking about what the essence of your book is so valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Hank's right. I hadn't thought of it quite that way before, and I think you're absolutely right. I think for me, it comes down to a couple things. One is the adventure. I think of a book like a travel itinerary almost. I mean, you know, except you don't know what's on the itinerary. You know, every time I travel, anywhere I go, there's always a moment where you have that sense of wonder and you're in that moment and you're in that place. And so I think of it as two things. One is this idea of the bespoke adventure, which is what we create for people. And the other one is being seen, and not for me, but for the readers. I want readers to have a sense that they have somehow felt seen in the book and that they have somehow felt understood, whether they identified with a character. It's been important to me in my last couple novels to include some aspects of mental illness. For me, it's obsessive compulsive disorder, which I suffer from. And so for readers who deal with certain things, to feel seen in a book is important to me.
And Anna, what about you in your books? Does any emotion resonate?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Really, Kim. The main reason why I do write in the fantasy genre is an insatiable curiosity, that possibility of what if, the wonder, the things that we can't explain, the mythos and where they originated, and the supernatural occurrences that we hear of, and why there could be a possible explanation behind them, or whether or not they are just to be accepted as what they are. And so I think it's that love of kind of the unknown that draws me toward mystery. And I love to give my readers the chance to live inside of some place that is fantastic and completely far away from this world that we're living in now.
So you need to answer now, Anna, plotter or pantser.
Pantser, absolutely. You nailed it. I love being surprised. I think it comes across on the page when the author is just as surprised as the reader, because there are times when my characters have done things that I didn't intend for them to do, and it worked out in such a beneficial way, and it drew me to an ending that led to another installment in the series that I hadn't planned on, but I realized was needed. And if I hadn't just gone along with the flow, then I wouldn't have gotten there on my own by plotting it out. So for me, I'm going along just like the reader is for a ride every time I write. And it keeps it interesting and fun as well for me as an author.
Mm-hmm. I should add that even as an outliner, I understand, even though I'm not a pantser, I can understand what the three of you are talking about, because it's like creating a map, but there's a difference between 30,000 feet and boots on the ground, because then when you do get boots on the ground, sometimes things happen. And those for me are my smaller scale version of having those things happen where it's like, oh, I didn't see that coming. And I do enjoy and welcome those moments of wonder. They're a little disconcerting.
They're great. But I mean, don't belittle the imagination that it took to write an outline. I mean,
Ugh.
you thought it's not like you could, it's easy to write down first this, then this, then this. That's incredibly difficult. That's a brain power that I can't, obviously, I have failed at. I can't even imagine doing that. So it's not that, I mean, we're sort of outlining as we go. Actually, we got to a certain point and we think, oh, then this has to happen. And then we do that, and then this has to happen. And it sort of blossoms, but it blossoms for you, Tosca, and just in a different way.
It does take some work. When you were saying that this editor had asked you for an outline, I was the eye clawing was, because that is so hard for me too. I hate being asked for an outline because that means I have to sit down and actually figure it out. It's like being asked for a synopsis, which I think is like the most dreaded ever. And I'd rather just write the book than write a synopsis.
And then write the synopsis afterward.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so hard.
But I think Hank, I completely agree with you. Just the free form ability to let it flow organically is just enjoyable, and in some ways,
But I do think that people who write without an outline, if readers and writers who are listening to this, all four of us understand what a story has to be. It has a beginning, middle, and an end. It has a character who you care about. It has a problem that needs to be solved. You're tracking down clues and following leads in whatever genre you are. You want the good guys to win in the end and the bad guys to get what's coming to them. And in the end, you want some justice and you want to change the world. And there's a flow of a story. There are the three acts of a story. There's the rhythm and metabolism of a story. So it's not like we're sitting down and just saying, I don't know what's going to come out. Let's just see. There's an architecture that exists. It's not that we don't have any idea of we have a structure. It's just what's going to be woven into the stanchions of that structure.
It's not like you're just meandering all over with the, following characters around because you understand the needs of the story. I think that's a really important point, really.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I would love to know, Hank, specifically, I see them on the desk behind you or on the bureau behind you, your Emmys for being an investigative reporter. How has that, oh my gosh. And,
there's a lot. There's a lot.
I'm old, that's why.
47, that was amazing. How has that helped you in your journey as an author? You mentioned a little bit of that earlier. Can you expound on that, how it's helped?
Because think about what I just said about the character who you care about and a problem that needs to be solved and the
Right.
good guy win and you get some justice. That is exactly the template for an investigative story. That is exactly the same. So when I started writing, I didn't start writing till 2005, I guess it was. I already been writing television stories for 30 some years. So I knew that rhythm of a story. I knew that I didn't know how a story would end when I started working on it, because if I did, it wouldn't be news. So I learned to have the confidence to go out in search of the story and have the confidence or naivete or something to think that I will find that. And so I practiced and practiced and practiced. The only thing I hadn't practiced was making things up. And that was the challenge, was to see if I could sit at this desk and create a whole new world. And that was a challenge to me, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it. The other thing so storytelling was what I had done for years, and that has served me well. The other thing that I learned professionally and being a reporter is that you cannot say I don't want to do this. If I said to my news director, can I be on the 6 o'clock news at like 10 after? Because I'm not really feeling it. Not feel the muse. How long would I have lasted? So,
Right.
So I understand from my experience that there'll be bad writing days. There'll be days when it's not fun. There'll be days when the words don't flow. And you just go on. You know, I say to my students, I say to my interns in investigative journalism, advance the story, advance the story. Do not get caught up in the quagmire of details. Go forward, 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 forward motion always. And I say to myself that I say that same thing to myself when I'm writing my books. Forward motion, forward motion. I have a very strict schedule about how my writing schedule and my writing words and my writing time, because I don't miss deadlines. I learned over all these years that you don't miss a deadline, that you make your promise, that we're professionals. And as a writer, I do what I promise to do. And as a reporter, I do what I promise to do. And when you realize as a writer that, you know, and in everybody's day jobs, we're pleasing the boss, right? But as a writer, we're the boss and we're pleasing ourselves. And that becomes like giving yourself a gold star every day. And I allow myself, by giving myself a certain number of words to write, I allow myself to succeed every day. Instead of failing every day, I allow myself to succeed. And that gives me the fuel to go on to the next day.
I love that. Set yourself up for success every single day. Fantastic advice. And Tosca, you have several books which are now optioned for television. Did you ever see that coming? I mean, what was it like to get that news?
Well, I think many writers hope for their books to be made into movies or TV. Maybe not all of them. And it can certainly go in other directions than what you might hope to. So there's always that option too. So it's not something that just happened really kind of overnight. I think when you have several books out, you've probably been approached at some point along the way by a producer or two, or inquiring about rights. And it's very cool the very first time it happens, and you think, oh my gosh, my book's going to be made into a movie, and then you can die of optimism after that. So I think it's really important when that does happen that you take it in stride and you do due diligence and pass it on to your agent and follow through, but you keep writing and pushing forward and doing the thing. That said, it's really cool when it gets to a certain point where we've got one now that I just saw the pilot treatment. So that was really fun. There's still a lot of stuff that has to happen. So, but I think as long as you're enjoying every minute of the process, it's a wonderful process. It's educational, every single part of it. And you learn more about story as you go too, because they're telling the story for TV. And so it's really interesting to watch how it all comes together.
That's so great.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I could not even imagine if that happened to me, what I would do.
I hope it does. I hope it does.
AJ, I wanted to ask specifically, what you do some really extensive research for your books. And you talked a little bit about this before with hostage negotiations and kidnapping negotiations. Can you expound on that? What kind of research has gone into some of these books that you've written and are currently writing?
Well, I studied the market before I decided to write about Thea Paris. And I noticed that although a lot of books have kidnapping plots, I couldn't really find many that had a lead kidnap negotiator or someone that did that for a living. And I thought kidnapping was fascinating. Unlike murder, where it's final and it's over, kidnapping is a purgatory of sorts. You are stuck between being alive, but not really living. And you're stuck in a frozen bubble where time kind of stops and everyone else's life moves on, but yours is basically stopped hard and cold. And you're reliant on other people for everything you need, from the smallest, necessities to the freedom to, walk around or be unchained. And I found that very interesting. I also felt that, it was a privilege to get to know hostages, former hostages, and understand what allowed them to survive during such harrowing circumstances. And there's things like just a few quick facts that I found really interesting. And that is that, of course, some, former hostages have PTSD and suffer greatly. Others actually resume a somewhat normal life. And it isn't always the length of the confinement that results in PTSD. It is often the intensity of the confinement. So someone that was taken even overnight and battered and harassed and mock executed can suffer intensive PTSD, where someone that is being kidnapped for a year may not have any ill effects because maybe they were kept, in a place that was relatively safe and pretty good hygiene. But I think one of the most powerful, experiences of my research is getting to know a gentleman named Peter Moore. And Peter was the longest held hostage in Iraq. Over 1,000 days he was held. And Peter, was kidnapped, and it's a long story, which I won't go into, but he was kidnapped with 4 British military gentlemen, and he's the only one who made it home. And the reason he made it home was because of his brilliance and his ingenuity and his ability to combat boredom by interviewing his stinky, filthy pillow in a job interview scenario where he played both parts. Or he was handcuffed to a radiator, and beside on the wall, there was an incredible array of cracks. He designed an entire subway system by using the cracks in the wall that he was able to replicate when he came home. So things like that, where, you kind of dive into a hostage's mind and you see how Peter negotiated for better food and better, circumstances and, freedom from his handcuffs for a couple of hours by using his, wiles and wit. I just think that in itself shows the unbelievable humanity and the human spirit and the strength that we all don't realize maybe that's inside of us.
Absolutely. And the last question that I want to ask to all of you is that each one of you has mentioned a strong female lead, and that's something that I really felt strongly incorporating myself. And do you feel that, what can you tell us is the best part about writing your strong female? What is their best quality that makes them a strong female lead? Tosca?
I was still thinking, something that popped into my mind is the need for just the one thing that I love about my strong female lead is that she's kind of funny. And I like that because when you put these people in these intense situations, life or death, and they have to, as Hank said, change the world or save the world, it's so intense that, I think that the ability to find the humor in various moments every now and then is something that I really enjoy. Someone who can be self-assured enough to laugh at themselves, someone introspective enough to learn, about their own foibles and weaknesses along the way and to overcome them. That's something that I really enjoy, but it's someone who can still find the lightness and the wonder and the humor in the world, even when it's falling apart. It's not something we would typically think of as strength, but it's something that I very much enjoy about a strong character, male or female.
Yeah, I think my main character in Her Perfect Life, let me show you the cover because look how gorgeous that is.
Gorgeous.
I love it. It's beautiful.
Just out right now. Lily Atwood is the main character, and she is a television reporter in Boston, extremely famous. She has fame, she has fortune, she has Emmys, she's the single mother, and this is the key, she's the single mother of a 7-year-old girl. And her daughter is the most important thing in her life. And one of the things I love about Lily is how relatable she is to any mom, because how far would you go to protect your daughter? And the key of it is that Lily is in the spotlight. Everybody knows who Lily Atwood is, and that is her biggest problem, because she has fame, she has fortune, she has Emmy, she has her daughter, but she also has a big dark secret. And Lily lives in the spotlight, and she begins to worry that how do you keep a secret when the spotlight is always on you? And it turns out that the spotlight is the most dangerous place of all. And Lily the key to Lily, she's a tough reporter and she chose the spotlight and she knows it's dangerous, but little Rowan, her daughter, didn't choose the spotlight. So I love having Lily have to deal with her own career, her own high stakes, high pressure career where she has to be perfect at every moment, and the knowledge that she has chosen a career that might have put her daughter in danger. And how does she deal with that? So I think every person who's a mom understands that balance between getting what you need from your career and success, but making sure that your family is safe. And that's how I hope that people connect with Lily.
That's quite profound, Hank. I really enjoy that. And I agree with you that it's really about connecting. It may not surprise you guys that female kidnap negotiators are very talented at their job. One of the main things that negotiators have to do is to interact with the hostage's family. And women are incredibly empathetic and talented at getting to the emotional heart of things. So they do very well in that position. Also, females are very good at de-escalation. And that is also a critical element of kidnap negotiation, to bring a hostage safely home, because you can imagine, the various types of kidnappers calling, asking and demanding and very kind of aggressive, and to be able to de-escalate that. And for me, I really wanted to write a female negotiator because I feel like there's so many things that women are breaking through to, like men's world. And I think something like an action adventure style job like this would be normally, a lot of men, but more and more women are going into this. And not only did I want to create a female character in this world, I also wanted to give her a physical disability, because to me, there aren't enough books about people with health problems. And I know, like, I have one, I have friends who have health problems. And I think that's critical when you write about, the everyday person. And so I gave Thea Paris type 1 diabetes. And, I used to write a lot about diabetes when I was a medical writer. And I feel like that also just empowers her, because not only is she in a man's world, but she has a chronic illness to combat.
Well, ladies, is there anything else that you want to add? It has just been an absolute pleasure to hear everything that you've had to say from beginning to end. Is there anything else that anyone would like to add?
I think everyone should go out and get Hank's new book. Let's show it again, Hank.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It's so crazy. It's launch week. And thank you, Kim,
Yes.
and all of you. I'll show it one more time because it is so incredibly
It's so
gorgeous.
beautiful.
And I can tell you
I
very
love
quickly
it.
the story that it came from, because I think that our experiences, and I'd love to know the two of you as well, three of you, because I think our own experiences, as you were talking about, Kim, the health situation informing how you write the book. And when I was working as a reporter, as an anchor person actually in Atlanta, I had finished anchoring the Saturday night news, and it was after midnight, and I was all done, and I came home, drove home, turned down my street, and the street was full of police cars with blue lights swirling, and it looked like a crime scene. And it soon became clear that the crime scene was my house. So I slammed on the brakes and parked the car and leaped out of the car and ran to the police officer and said, "I'm Hank Phillippi." And he said, "I know who you are." And I said, "Oh, well, that's my house." And he said, "Yep, I know." He said, "We caught a guy breaking into your house. That's him in the cruiser back there." And they said, "He told us that he broke into your house because he knew you were on television, live on television. So he knew you weren't home." So he knew where I was, so he knew where I wasn't. And that was the haunting idea of the danger and the vulnerability of being in the spotlight. And that's the situation that I put Lily in. And that's where her perfect life came from, because of course the title is ironic. There is no perfect life, especially when you're in the spotlight.
Wow. Well said. I mean, just for like a safety announcement, when I've studied kidnapping, it's very important when you travel to not post your vacation photos until you've come home. Not only will your house potentially be robbed, but if people are following you and want to get you, they'll know exactly where to find you. So, you know, and that your story dovetails perfectly with that, Hank.
I'm buying more home
But-
security
but a
cameras.
reporter- I'm so sorry, but Kim, but a reporter can't help it. And that's the thing. And that's the thing that makes Lily's job, or any reporter or anchor's job, so difficult, is she is live. She is the anchor of the 11 o'clock news. So that is where she is. And this is the door that she comes out every night. And that sort of seething, constant vulnerability is something that is very hard to combat. And that's, you know, that, so I agree with you. And that's a really wise thing to say. So this was before the time of that everyone had house alarms. So a wise neighbor had called the police and noticed that someone was breaking into my house, and that's the only reason we found out. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Tosca. Forgive me.
No, I was just saying, I hope you have a lot of home security cameras now. Even at the farm, we have them all over. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have any stories like that, and I have not been able to yet glean very much of my stories from my own personal experience. I will tell you, I wrote a story about the descendants of Elizabeth Bathory, the infamous blood countess who was rumored to bathe in the blood of virgins to stay young and beautiful. And as I was writing the story, I learned my mother's a lifelong genealogist. And we are related to this other lifelong genealogist in Scotland. And I learned I'm distantly related to Elizabeth Bathory. So there was that. And then I started a pandemic series after that, and it came out, both books came out right before the pandemic started. So I keep saying that maybe my next book should be about an author who wins the lottery.
Yeah.
I like it. Or perhaps the end of the pandemic.
Or okay, what was I thinking? Yes, yes, end of the pandemic first.
Wins the lottery, and then
wins the lottery.
Well, for me, the genesis of mine was actually my adoption story. So I was adopted as a child, as a baby in Houston. And the only thing that I knew was that my heritage was Australian. And so from there, I took it on a very wild fantasy ride and took the main protagonist to the outback of Australia. And I sort of lived out a fantasy that I had always thought of and was just very far-fetched. And it's a secret society of vampires and lycanthropes that exist hidden to human eyes. So there we are. It's nothing like the original story. As I have reconnected with my biological maternal side of my family. So that is not the case, but it was very much fun to live out that fantasy and write this series. So that is my personal experience with my books.
That's great. I mean, it could happen. It's not, you said it's far-fetched. Okay, but it could happen.
You know, maybe there is a lot of science and genetics that's thrown in there, so it makes it more believable for the reader when you incorporate actual facts alongside fantasy. Then it's easier to digest that maybe this could possibly maybe happen if you think hard enough. But Tosca, I like your idea. Can you make it like a group of 4 writers that all win the lottery right before the pandemic ends? That would be awesome.
Apparently I have powers, so.
Apparently you do.
Well, ladies, it has been a fantastic experience getting to chat with you all. Everyone, go check out the links in the description below so that you can find out more information about all of their books and them as authors. And just a huge thank you to taking the time out of your day, and Hank especially, since it's a launch week. Everyone, go pick up Her Perfect Life. amazing book. And make sure that that you go check out those links, like I said, in the description below for more information about everyone on the panel today. Ladies, thank you again. It's been a sincere honor and privilege to have you with me tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. And congratulations, Hank.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes, congratulations.
it's so wonderful to be with you all. It's very reassuring to be in this community of such supportive authors. So thank you, Anna, for bringing us all together.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Absolutely. Anytime, open invitation, say the word. You're on. All right, ladies, have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
Good night.